Hey people, I started on this a couple weeks ago, but a comment on my last movie made me want to finish it up and turn it into a comedy. It's a good movie. It shows where I found the code that the Latin and Greek Vulgate Bibles were written in. Marked in yellow is XR, that's the Hebrew letters XR. And that was their word for adversary. And adversary was your opponent, one who speaks against you. And it changes up in the three Vulgate Bibles, the Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, because they had different adversaries, and these books were all custom written for them. So these are the letters. Chi is your X, and Rho is your R. The Chi Rho, the RX. So the Catholic Church will have you believe that means Christ. That's X, Chi, Rho, the first two letters of Christ. But it's been around since the beginning of writing. They've been the fish head gods have been ruling under the Chi Rho. And you don't recognize it because the signs were different. This is the old Chi, and this was the old Rho. And so the Chi was the crotch of Inanna. This is the old ancient Chi Rho. And that was your Christ. So in most all your old languages it looked like a plant. Most of them had a little loop over the top. You've seen this one often. This was your letter Tazadi, X. But the story in Genesis 3, it was in Egyptian and Hebrew coins where God had cursed the snake. It was a snake, and that's when the snake got no limbs. The snake had arms before he messed up in the garden. That's what that story is about. That's your Tazadi, X. And so that gives you a time of the story when you date the language. So that's what this is. It's the Chi. And Inanna was Mother Earth. And she was pushing up the plants out of her crotch. The crotch of a grass growing. That's called Inanna. And so back in the day that was pronounced Gra. O. That's where your word grow come from. And so she's hollering grow. Grow. Mother Earth. Make it grow. And all these fish head gods, that was what they did. That's what that sign meant. Is they grew. They were growers. That's how they ruled. So this one that comes up just XR comes up 33 times here. And it means narrow, adversary. Many different meanings, usually adversary. And this class of word is 111 times. And it'd be BXR here. KXRU. And it's the XR is the root word. So that XR is the root word of the taxer and also the treasure. But if you're new here, I don't go by the rabbis can't read this language. They don't write it because they can't read it. They memorize the Bible. I just look at their interpretation so I can find the word easier when I look for a word. But it also comes up in another class that's not included in here, another class of XR words. But that's what these all have in common, is the XR. Adversary, limited, foe. You might have seen a movie called the Lorax. I'm the Lorax, and I protect the forest. And that's what this is. Anytime you see attack, that next word reads forwards and backwards. Anything reading with the A reads backwards. L-O, low. The Lorax taxer. Larxtxr. And there's a lot of hidden information in your Disney movies that nobody sees. I just found this one, and it looks real interesting. I'm going to get into it later. But this is Ka, and then it has a tack reads backwards. Ka, K-I-R-U-X-T-X-U-R. And that's, if you find any 600-year-old books, you see that's the spelling of church. The K-R-U-X. The Latin give the X the C-H, and it's your kirch. That was the word for church. The church taxer. The church taxware. The tidings. Now, I know I told you at the beginning this is going to make a comedy out of this, but everything I'm telling you is true. I'm not trying to mislead anyone. But this is the one I was wanting to get to. I like it when I find words doubled up. And they're doubled up a couple times in this one. So this is that line, and it actually has three doubles. It's got the adversary, and the enemy. And it starts with another one, with the schmo to schmo. You see there's the same word here. And so every time a word doubles up, they give it the meaning very or indeed. When you're dead, you're moody moot. But we look at that word, and it's probably set up a couple different times. And so you'll see every time it means diligently or will indeed or surely or truly. Hear, listen, and you'll see that it comes twice. The schmo, in fact, this one has a U in it. To schmo. You see, every time it comes up twice, it'll mean very much indeed. And any word, they'll do that too. When you're dead, you're moody moot. So this starts with chemo, to give from knowledge, or chemo. My brother's name's Jacques, and he calls himself chemo. And I got a Hawaiian friend named James, and he calls himself chemo. But I believe Jacques is the bartender. To give waters. And then to tears, the eye waters. To see from schmo. Reads backwards and forwards. To see from schmo to schmo. In flew. In fly, it would be Greek. They turn the U into the Y, but this past tense. In flew. In flew was it colors. W-O-S. To I consume it, I-T. And was it the colors? The colors, this call, that's where the word calendar come from. And so it's the call of, the time of, or the call of. It means not all, but a certain time. It's which is Cullen's next, and it's the colors. To call it the first fires knowledge, first consume knowledge. First thing you learn, when the police come, somebody rob me, they're going to say, well, what do you recognize? What can you tell me about him? And you're going to tell them a color. He had a red shirt, Everybody's wearing a shirt. You're going to remember the colors first. The colors of Rabbadah. Reads backwards. Rabbadah. So Rabbadah means oxtail. In the time of Rabbadah would be Rabbadan. Put an end on the end of it means that cycle. The festival of Rabbadan in February 20th, 25th. And so that would be the festival of the oxtail over here in Pisces in February. And so it was actually shifted more at the time of this writing. This curved line is showing the path of the sun. And so this is known as a cross when it crosses over the equator. And so this one cycle from here to here is 1 year. And so when it crosses on this time, this is in Virgo. And this would be the Southern Cross. This star had marked the Southern Cross. And so that means that it's leaving Leo, going to Virgo, and it's crossing down to go to the south side. So the Southern Cross marks the time of the Southern Cross. So all these stars stay in place, and all the animals stay in place, but the serpent is what's moving, this snake. And so the top of this wave, this is 6,000 years between each line. The top of this wave is moving in this direction. It's moving here. So at the time of this writing, this wave would have been lower. And so this is probably the point that was talking about Rabbadah was what we call Easter. So it looks like, chemo could be a shopkeeper, anybody with the job to give from power, and then backwards to see from schmo to schmo, somebody who sees schmoes coming in all day. And flu was it the colors of Rabbadah in that time around Easter. Way bitty, W-A-Y-B-T-Y, small, way bitty too. And it has a tack here. So this one of them words have two meanings, to give, K, to give by, B-Y, to give by, and then it reads back the other way. So to give by is if you're an enlisted man and an officer's coming, you give him by. He's got the right of way to give by. And then backwards is the power, powers to make, by, give. And so that would be like somebody taking the toll to go over the bridge. Hiram Abik, the toll man collecting the toll, to give by to the powers to collect, to charity, Chiro, the adversary, XR, to Chiro T, to the Chiro tie, the charity to, and it reads backwards and forwards, the Kirch. And so he's slurring his word with a couple of R's there, because he's dreading seeing the man come trying to collect money again. The Kircher, the Kircheric, Cheric or cleric. You see that Rick in the name of all those people in that church. The clerics. Oh, church, the Kircheric. And so in this one, it looks like he's dreading into way bitty, the small, to give by the collector of the charity. And so it looks like in the Hebrew Bible that they're not fond of the Chiro, the church collecting. And so I'm going to pull this off in the Greek and the Latin, put them all side by side, and show you their different books, and they have different adversaries. So this looks like the Chiro's reply. And so these people were really genius back then, and you can see how even in these words, the aku and aku, and the words are similar. They similarly match up. Somebody worked really hard trying to cover this book. They tried to destroy this, but this was the anarchist book here from the Alchemist, and this was the church, and the Chiro. And so if you haven't seen my last movie, I explain why I read this in this fashion, but it's the code 72. But I read the last two letters and then the word. The last two and then the word. And so this is on, A-N, on the. on the on thou hawk, on the hack, H-A-K. On the hack has accuse, has T-H-I, has this, them, is fun. On the hack has this accuse, has this, them, is fun. And this Vav, they always manage to put it across from the Vav. They did a real good job of matching it up and changing the language. And so sometimes it's to, sometimes it's and sometimes it's part of the next word. It's a W. To his poise, to his pay has. They changed the O and the A up a lot. The pay, poi, the P's, your little pay. The P's has to pan. So see a nay. So see a nay. So see a nay, you're not going to pay. Entellum, E-N-T-E-L-L-O-M. And tell them who is. Every time you see an O at the beginning, you usually put an H in front of it. So it's who is Sue. Who is you? Extero. That's where your word exterminate come from. And it also your borders, your exterior. Who's protecting your borders? Your extu is toys. Extero is to his extero house. O-U-S-H-O-U-S. Who's protecting the exterior of your house? And then W-A-Y. The way, anti, a replacement. The way, anti, for replacement. The key, K-E-I-S. To replace the keys, some. Is toys. Quit toying with me. Or a anti-keyman. I'm going to send the locksmith to lock you out of the house. O-U-S. H-O-U-S. The anti-keys. Anti-keysome. The anti-keyman. To replace the keysome from the anti-keyman, the locksmiths. So if we go over here to the Latin, quad C, to here, if we just look at the translation to English, if you listen to his voice and do all that, I will be your enemies and foes. If you listen to his voice and do all that, I will be your enemies and foes. But if indeed you obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. So they totally changed the meaning. It says I'll be your enemy and foe, but here I'll be your enemy to your enemies. I'll be on your side, and an adversary to your adversaries. So those who speak against you, I will speak against them. So it's a total opposite meaning here. If you listen to his voice and do all that, I will be your enemies and foes. So that's that Latin. Like I said in that last movie, the Latin reads the same as the Greek. It reads in the 72 code. So what really happened, I did a movie a couple years ago. I was looking into it, and I used to just be able to Google Arch of 82 and it would bring me there. But now it tries to sell me something. But this old Arch of 82, called the Arch of Titus. And if you click on this here, it'll talk about the old Arch of 82 that was down by the racetrack. And when I looked into this more, it looked like there was an ammunition plant that blowed up and destroyed all Rome. When they built Rome, they built it on top of an ancient, huge city. It already had huge plumbing underneath. It already had all the sewage system in. All them big buildings was already there. But yeah, it looked like they was in a war, and it looked like they had an ammunition plant blow up. And this new arch is somewhere around here. But this old arch was down here by the racetrack. And you can look at pieces of it still there. And it seemed like somewhere there was a big plant here that had blowed up and totally destroyed all of Rome. So I pulled this off of the Latin, and I used the 72 code, and so it starts OD, odd, and then it reads back all the way through again, being this is the capital. Sometimes lines don't start with capitals, and that's why. Sometimes it doesn't read the same. But it's odd codicy. And I pulled it all off up here. What I did, I read here and here, then here and here, the last two, and then this side, last two. And I pulled them all off here. And it looks like a poet had wrote this after the war. And Latin has a hard time, even though these are law words, Latin has a hard time translating this. But odd, O-D, is where your word odd, O-D-D, come from. And it's an ancient word meaning the strange forces of nature that we don't understand. Odd codicy. So a quo is a time, and your quo is a time, in the odd times to see. Saudi rem vocu, and these are both law words, and that it's not interpret them, but rem, the power about or against. In rem jurisdiction, power about or against the thing is a legal term describing the power a court may exercise over property. The power of a court over a property after you got locked out. And invoke means to call up a higher power. So a higher court over to exercise over the property. So that the odd, the strange powers of nature that we don't understand, times through C, the Saudi remvoku, to have power over to have a judicial power over the land. To see it is physeria, the disease of poop. Omni, that's where your word omnish come from, to lessen, for loco, to lessen the crazy. Us in a microes, in nemesis stew, and that would be interpreted as enemies. but I think it's more like animosity, enmity. Is growing, and problems between growing. Us any micros, and then just us little ones not having any power over. In the stewing animosity, in intimacy to powers from, to learn from, affilages, affiligenty, and that interprets to rock hard, to afflict, affligent, to afflict, the afflictors, to afflict, to learn from the afflictors, to afflict. So I have to read that whole chapter in the Latin to figure out what he's talking about, because like I say, they're different books. It's 3 different books, and the first one come from the alchemist that wasn't happy that the Rome SS was taxing him to go over the bridge, charging a toll. And then this Greek was Rome's way of sending a smart book back, and possibly this was just 2 alchemists in a contest copying, trying to imitate an even older work. There ain't no telling how long it's been going on. And then after this war, it did a lot of damage, destroyed all libraries, and people just weren't that smart after that. And this is just the best he'd come up with, is this Latin in this 72 code. And since then it's been turned into a religion, and they try to get rid of the older books so people don't figure out that this religion was all created from poetry. That was just old stories that were made to rhyme, not necessarily to be 100% truth, but formed to make rhyme and to show their wit, and creating words that read forward and backwards, sometimes whole lines that read forwards and backwards. So I'm going to get more into this later, because sometimes where it says an adversary, it says Satan in the Hebrew, and it'll say Diablos in the Greek. But I'm going to cut this off here. Alright, good day.